Good morning and welcome to the 10th Berwick Literary Festival from the most northerly town in England and the first town you come to if you come south from Scotland. It's a pleasure to welcome our guest today. The theme of poetry and nature certainly is very relevant. Just now, every morning we have great skeins of wild geese coming over on migration from Scandinavia. And it's one of the joys to look up at 8 o'clock in the morning and see the geese arriving, which will be with us here. So we've got certainly place and nature together here, but I hope that's not too much grief. This is the 10th Berwick Literary Festival. But it's also an important anniversary for our guests today because it is the 15th anniversary, I think, since the foundation of Nine Arches Press. And last year, Nine Arches joined us, and it's a particular pleasure to see them back again and adding to our festival. Poetry has a strong part in our festival. I think it's one of the things that sets Berwick apart from others. We have writing workshops, we have live readings like this in person and on Zoom. We have talks about poets, and it's been a strong strand. And if possibly the highlight was Wednesday evening, we had a poetry cabaret where people read their own work in a very pleasant wine bar down here in town. So this is an important part. And I think if you were with us last year, and you can remember the reading, the three poets and the session there was one of the more memorable events of our last year festival. This is going to be recorded, so this isn't your only chance to hear these readings again. They will be on our YouTube channel, and we hope that you'll be able to enjoy them again in future. But what I really want to do now is say welcome to Jane Commane on behalf of Nine Arches Press. Thank you for joining us again. Thank you for bringing your colleagues to read to us today. And I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to leave Jane to talk a bit about Nine Arches Press, introduce our readers today, and sit back and enjoy what's to come, as I'm sure you will yourself. But thank you for joining us, and I really think we're in for something special today. Thank you. Jane, over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for the wonderful introduction. It's a real delight to be back at Berwick Literary Festival again this year. Thank you for welcoming us and our poets. I'm really delighted to be presenting poetry from Ian Humphreys, Isobel Dixon and David Clarke today. Nine Arches Press is a publisher based in the West Midlands, in the Midlands of the UK, and we have been publishing for 15 years, as Michael says. We've had nearly 140 poetry books, 30 editions of our magazine, and we host a wide range of events, including live poetry events, online poetry, but also we mentor writers as well. We have two schemes, Dynamo and Primers, which support the development of new writers, as well as publishing a whole host of really wonderful poetry books. I'm especially delighted to be presenting these three books that have been published this year in 2023 by three writers who all are drawing on these familiar and important threads of nature, grief and place. I will give you an introduction to each poet slightly more formally in a moment. And once I've done that, they will read in order of Ian Humphreys, Isobel Dixon and David Clarke, and then we will all come back together at the end just to say goodbye to you all as well. But I wanted first of all to say a little bit about each of their books and the themes for this morning's events. Each in their way is connected by the familiar thread of nature, and in this the complexities of grief, whether that is through bereavement or the grief we experience at the effects of climate change, species loss, the threat of extinction, the changing nature of landscapes, our place in those places, history's insistent and constant turning, our memories, our connections, landscape, nature, grief, so much held within all of those topics. Ian Humphreys' new book, Tormentil, is a precise and richly textured collection of poems that take us out into the moors of Calderdale in West Yorkshire. The opening poem here tunes in our attention to a little yellow flower, the tormentil, which blooms and creeps through the moorland. Known for its healing properties, the wildflower itself becomes symbolic through so much of Ian's poems in this collection, representing variously hope, resistance, survival, and joy. Isobel Dixon's poetry explores the incredible diversity and interdependence of the natural world we are, sadly, a little too close to losing. Her verdant poems draw inspiration from some of art and literature's finest nature observers, D.H. Lawrence, Ted Hughes, Emily Dickinson, and Georgia O'Keeffe. The book is alive with bats and whales, blossoms, snakes, and roses, as well as beautiful illustrations by the Scottish artist Douglas Robertson, which we will show during the reading as well. David Clarke's book, The Field in Winter, studies the loop of seasons, in nature and in living, bringing us full circle through plum harvests and frosts, summer's end and coming storms. And here the landscapes, though often English, there are also dispatches from the borderlands of Poland, poems written at Krasnogruda, and the sense of the human world's own tensions and grief. To more formally introduce each poet to you, Ian Humphreys' debut collection, Zebra, from Nine Arches Press, was nominated for the Portico Prize, and his second collection, Tormentil, won a Royal Society of Literature Matters Award while in progress. He's editor of Why I Write Poetry and the producer and co-editor of After Sylvia, Poems and Essays in Celebration of Sylvia Plath, both also published by Nine Arches. In 2023, Ian was appointed writer-in-residence at the Bronte Parsonage Museum. He is widely published in journals and anthologies and has written for the BBC. Ian is a fellow of the Complete Works. Isobel Dixon grew up in South Africa, where her debut, Weather Eye, won the Olive Schreiner Prize. She studied in Edinburgh and now lives in Cambridge, frequently returning to her family home in the Great Karoo. Her collections are A Fold in the Map, Bearings, and The Tempest Prognosticator, which J.M. Coetzee described as a virtuoso collection. All are published by Nine Arches Press. Mariscat published her pamphlet, The Leonids, and she co-wrote and performed in the Titanic centenary show, The Debris Field, with Simon Barraclough and Chris McCabe. She's worked with filmmakers, composers, and artists, and her work is recorded for the Poetry Archive. David Clarke's first pamphlet, Gord, won the Michael Marks Award in 2013. His third collection, Arc, was published by Nine Arches Press in 2015 and longlisted for the Polari Prize. Another pamphlet, Scare Stories, was published by V Press in 2017 and was named a Poetry Society Book of the Year. His second collection, The Europeans, was published by Nine Arches in 2019, and his poems have appeared in publications including Magma, Poetry Wales, and The Guardian. Ian will read first, followed by Isobel, and then David. So if you'd like to please welcome our first reader, Ian Humphreys.
Thank you, Jane, for those lovely introductions. And also thanks to the festival team for inviting us to read today. It's really great to be here. I'm beaming in from Hebden Bridge in West Yorkshire, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Isobel and David read from their new collections a bit later. So I'm going to start my set with the title poem from my new book, Tormentil. It's a short poem, but it introduces the collection's key theme of loss, as well as the book's main motif, the Tormentil flower. And that's a tiny yellow flower that threads through the moorlands up here where I live in West Yorkshire. And it also threads through the collection as well, as both a visual of the flower itself, which often pops up in different poems, but also by suggestion through images of stars and coins and other small, shiny, golden things. But here's the poem. Tormentil. I can't face the big stuff, so I comb the moors for a tiny yellow flower, treasured in wartime for healing wounds. Some named it bloodroot or flesh and blood, others shepherd's knot. Up here, gold thread creeps through boggy peatland grass, splashes of sun under a dark sky. So the next poem I'll read for you was inspired by a story that my mum used to tell me as a child. It's a prose poem, but it does have a concrete shape, one continuous column. And the significance of that shape hopefully will become clear as the poem reveals itself. It's called Whose Story? When I was a boy, my mum would tell me the tale of her great-grandfather, the first black man to ride a horse in Hong Kong. He was from Mozambique, a lone soldier who rode up and down Pottinger Street as if leading a military procession. He was decorated. This was back in the 1880s. Children flung open the shutters of pastel-stained shophouses to stare and point. As he trotted past, armors threw buckets of laundry slops in his wake, washing away the sin. Men spat, hack guai. Only white people were meant to take the air upon the hill. In later years, the Chinese were forbidden to live there. So my great-great-grandfather navigated the muggy lowlands, silent and straight-backed on his Arabian steed. He thought he might make friends with the Chinese, but they had found someone they could look down on. Even though he drips with medals, the elders said, you can bet his heart is blacker than his skin. Or perhaps their words had been sweetened that day with longans and lychees. This foreigner is a warrior like Yazuke, the legendary black samurai. We must treat him with respect. Nobody knows where he met my great-great-grandmother or how they eloped to Macau. To be honest, no one knows very much at all. I've dreamt up most of this story because my people's history is spun on whispers and that one curious image of the first black man to ride a horse in Hong Kong. It's awful to admit that things might be easier if my great-great-grandfather had been the first white man to ride a horse in Hong Kong. At least then we'd have some answers, official documents of his life gathering dust in a museum, and of course, a fine statue to commemorate the occasion, man and horse on a pedestal. So here's another poem inspired by my childhood, and it's set during a long, hot summer in the early 1980s. It's called Wasp in a Jam Jar. A sticky August afternoon, our neat street swoons in the heat wave. The smell of burning eggs spirals from a forgotten frying pan. Or was it the fresh laid tarmac sweating chemicals yards from my bedroom? Or the forbidden boys, shirtless in glue-on scowls, torching a blown tire in the precinct? Later, I watched them necking cider on the library steps, dead-legging, flicking through a top-shelf glossy. Each flare of laughter stung. Dad got angry when he found out they'd planted palm prints in the soft tar. I couldn't tell him it was me, feeling my way into the dark, marking the road out of there. So this poem is called The Rochdale Canal, and my mum loved visiting Hebden Bridge where I live. And this is based on a walk that we did many, many years ago. The Rochdale Canal. When I find myself slipping, I hold on and remember what the canal taught me. No journey is a straight line. The last time we walked here together, I reminded you that not long ago, this waterway cut a dark scar through the Pennines, from Manchester to Sowerby Bridge. Its future slippery, almost sunk. But look at it now, you said. Look at the colours. On a picnic bench by the Stubbing Wharf, you slipped breaded scampi from your plate to mine. You always ordered too much when eating out, loved to share your good luck with family. I remember your smile. I told you how horses hauled the cargo-heavy boats back in the 1800s, how a wise farrier adapted the U of a horseshoe with spiked nails to grip the towpath's wet stone. Steady now. I remember you smiling at that first slip of water over wood at Loch 11. It can take an eternity to fill a void. Look at the ferns thriving deep in the chamber wall, how they hold firm, soft fingers outstretched, drowned, until the flood recedes and the sun revives them. I remember your love for these painted narrowboats, the way they garland the canal bank like festival lanterns. Listen to the jackdaws slipping and tumbling above the old mill chimney, their laughter echoing in its throat. But where is our kingfisher? She must be close, waiting to slip from a willow tree, to swoop and sip her bright blue reflection. And now for a different kind of lost poem, one that looks at loss in the natural world by contemplating a creature which, kind of like the tormented flower, is small and often overlooked. Earthworm on tarmac. O silent concertina, one mouth, 5 hearts, one arsehole. Dirt pearls cast in your wake. How did you get here, needled by the furious sun? Half an hour ago, soft sanctuary, the drag of home through your body. I could pick you up, flick you onto the grass verge. I could leave you frying on the curb, plump and sausage pink. The magpie would thank me, and that curious child, his scalpel fingernails. Can you eat pain, earthworm? Do you swallow buried mistakes? You, who ploughs the muck at our feet, stirs the soup of forest past. Earthworm, are you worth bending for, kneeling for? So this is the last poem I'll be reading. Thank you all so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. So in this final piece, which I guess is more of a performance poem, loss is touched on in terms of the loss of hard-won gains that we've made as a society over the last few decades. And also there's a hint at a kind of loss of humanity, which sadly is reflected in current world events. The poem features a playground slur from the 1970s and 80s that was often directed at boys who didn't behave in a traditionally masculine way. So my original idea for this piece was to reclaim that slur, turn a negative into a positive. But the poem kind of ended up doing something very different to its original aim. It's called Prayer for the Fabulous Ones. Hail big Marys, full of gin. The love is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst drag queens, and blessed is the fruit on thy headpiece. Jesus, that is the biggest, drunkest Mary I've ever seen. Holler at the moon, you wig-slip mothers of Stonewall, Pride, of Russian queer rights activist Yelena Grigorieva, murdered after her address appeared online on a hit list, of Alireza Fazeli Monfared, 20, beheaded in Iran by members of his own family. Alireza loved lip-syncing and making TikToks. Remember Daniel Aston, Kelly Loving, Ashley Poore, Derek Rump, Raymond Green Vance, shot dead at Club Q, Colorado Springs. Remember Brianna Gay from Warrington. She was 16, the year of our Lord, 2023. Raise a pint to absent friends, big Marys. Praise the lost, loved, living, and forgive this poem's directness and sincerity. Sachet for us, shade those who sing against us. Now and at the hour of last orders, chin chin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. It's wonderful to be reading today with my Nine Arches comrades, Ian and David. And as you've heard, and I hope you'll hear more, it's a very special thing to be in the presence of poets who can deal with the small and the big things in such attentive and quietly powerful ways. I'm going to begin with two poems from my collection, A Whistling of Birds, with thanks to Jane Commane for publishing and to Douglas Robertson for, I think, a dozen beautiful images in this book. And the first two poems I'm going to read are sea traveling poems. One a water traveler, a whale, and the second poem about the Arctic tern, a shorter poem for the small and far-flying Arctic tern, or titiric as it's known in Scottish Islands. The first poem is called Whalefall, and the word came to me when a friend mentioned over lunch that when a whale dies and its body sinks slowly to the bottom of the ocean, that phenomenon, as it feeds all kinds of creatures on the way to the ocean floor, is known as whalefall. So this is that poem, Whalefall. Barging from continent to continent, so long, old man, old mammoth of the sea, you're fully up the spout or down, congenial host with the most heart, chest, lungs, spleen, baleen. I could swim through the arcades of your veins, and now you're slowly giving more, going that extra fathom deep, the ocean blizzarding your generous afterlife, the trickle down effect. Your guests squat lobster, rat tail, hagfish, bristleworm, osedax, sea cucumber, the sleeping shark. Give them a flipper, they take a fluke. And why not now, after all those years of so much krill? You peduncle slapper, bolshy wave breacher, spy hopper, lobtailer, lollapalooza, seafall, good spill, deep oil for the masses of the trench. Mauve ribbons bind and bore your bulk, the pleats of your throat, and limpets clamp your whited bones. Plumed worms, the quiet spiral snails, the marrow fat bacteria, the banquet of the century, your last hurrah. And the Tyrricks are on the cover of the book, these birds which fly immense distances between the poles. And the poem is a short one, which has a little bit of a shape of a bird. Tyrrich. Arctic, Antarctic, turning, returning. Turn, Tyrrich, turn. Unerring Tyrrich, untiring Tyrrich. Turn, Tyrrich, turn. Returning, turning. Antarctic, Arctic. There are quite a lot of travellers in A Whistling of Birds, travellers of all shapes and sizes, from the birds to the bees, frogs, and a dung beetle, one of those star navigators. I'm not going to read the dung beetle today, but I'm going to read a shorter poem about another star navigator, the crab. There are a few crab poems in the book, but this one is titled simply Man. Man, just because you walk tall, be careful what you disregard. Even a crab sidling out, a walking stone from under one, can see, many-eyed, the stars. That's a poem that sidles a little bit sideways, stepwise across the page as well. And thinking about the things that humankind disregards and doesn't value enough or protect enough, along with human life, I've been thinking a lot about trees. And I wrote this poem several years ago for an anthology about trees. And it has taken on a bit of a new leaving and a new shape for the poem in the collection. And of course, recently we've suffered some great tree losses. I think of the outcry and the grief around the lost iconic tree, the sycamore at Sycamore Gap. And I've also been reading and highly recommend the Richard Powers book, The Overstory, which is an extraordinary book about trees. This poem imagines a world without trees and is called How the Light Filtered Through the Leaves. I have resisted forest thoughts for fear of finding not a wilderness, but only empty parking lots inside. Our just deserts, the dizzy heights, an arid spiral to the pool. I see a woman grip a stick of chalk, scouring her mind for leaves. One dusty shade of green, and oh, she should have looked. Pinnate, palmate, parallel is all she can recall. The veins and margins blur, recede. Tree ghosts, a page of scrapbook skeletons. A curtain's pattern, painted ivy twining round a remnant cup. I've never carved my name into a living trunk, but there are trees that have imprinted me. Orange, chestnut, poplar, mulberry. Mood lighting, forest dusk. The creatures chirp and scratch. Some track an archivist preserved. The forest, though, was never portable, won't slide into the matchbox hatch. It is the opposite of that, though part of it, all now consumed. I'm going to turn back in the collection to a poem with the title Rosa ex Damascena, the Damask Rose, the Rose of Damascus. It's a poem that came from a visit to Syria, to Damascus, before the war, not that long before the terrible war. And part of it draws on a very powerful news report from Syria during the war by Jeremy Bowen, who we see reporting now on another war. Rosa X Damascena. I saw the map of the city blossom in your hand, its twisting streets, the market's heart, where we got lost among the crowds at night. So many helpers trying to show the foreigners the way to go, amused by us, soft and confused, on foot, seeking out a restaurant with wine. I remember it as ruby smooth, from Lebanon, and the glass of a shining bowl of polished vegetables to cut and eat, so fresh and crisp and chill. A scarlet egg of lapidary glass in my silver charm, and the sheen of a shawl of Syrian silk brocade, shared smiles to clinch the happy deal with the boy from Palestine who thought it was a lucky day. I wear it with an ache, and wonder what the days have brought him since, back then, when we were told things are about to change, though they meant for the better, not right to this. Douma used to smell of roses, but all the perfumes of Arabia could not mask the scent of gunpowder and blood. This killing rain falls clear, unscented too, as well as burning garlic, mustard, yellow fire. The city's carmine bloom, smeared shades, tints ground to powder underneath a ruthless heel. The rubble sheltered patterned scraps, softness of wool and flesh, each sole and palm a crumpled map, their ways erased. But we know the paths of far-off wars, have seen the crush of handcarts, scooters, trucks traverse such rutted tracks before. An old man rages to the camera. His headscarf shakes a red-white blur. Where is the world? We are humans, not animals. A house and garden strapped onto his bicycle. We are humans. A satchel and 3 faded floral carpet rolls. And who will pick the shrapnel from the fields, harvests of teeth and thorns? Who will grow the 30-petaled rose? We will never see Aleppo as it was, Palmyra's blasted arch, but grieve the lost protectors, not just the precious burden of antiquities. Blind sightseers among battered lands, forgive our eyes and useless hands. We cannot bring you flowers for your wounds. Know nothing of what those who live cannot unsee. I'm going to go a little bit off-piste for a moment and read a poem from The Tempest Prognosticator, an earlier book published by 9 Arches, thinking about terrible bombardments. This poem is called Mountain Wartime, and it has an epigraph about Mount St. Helens in eastern Washington state. And eastern Washington state is the site of the Hanford Works atomic energy plant, where element 94 plutonium was made for the Fat Man bomb. The poem is called Mountain Wartime, and this is the epigraph. Will Mount St. Helens continue to build until it surpasses its former majesty, or will it blow itself apart in a new fury of destruction? From the National Geographic, volume 160, number 6, December 1981, which I read as a girl and was fascinated by the recovery of nature after the volcanic explosion of Mount St. Helens then. Mountain Wartime. Renowned for its height and perfect cone, the American Fuji sun now rises with a broken crown above the slopes made mud and ashscape. burying bobcat, spotted owl, and elk. Ghost vapors from a methane lake unfurl before the pearly everlasting and the lilies of the avalanche emerge, trailing blackberry, lupine, bracken fern, disguise the scars of that May day in this volcanic arc. The cascades shaken, parted from old certainties. Remember, here, this is the ring of fire, the lava flow not far from where, made pure, element 94, plutonium, formed Fat Man's core. The sumo bomb, its promised rain of ruin. Molten kimono flowers, singed to skin. A city threshed and sown with blossoms, fissioning. So from those blossoms, the kimono blossoms and the damask rose, I'm going to read a short poem about individual damage and recovery. It's called Age of Blossom. And there's an image that goes with it too by Douglas Robertson, who did the images in A Whistling of Birds. Age of Blossom. Even after winter's iron, a rain-slaked garden blossoms unquenchable heart. How a woman, after the knife, finds she is still herself, that the girl who walked under spring-wet trees is not yet lost, that the sap spurts greenly under the bark. The trees in exile walk, but the same moon's cream is balm. In an orchard of rusted swords, the blossoms surge and soothe. And I'm going to read a poem that is also about recovery after difficult times. It's called Self-Portrait in Sweet Woodruff, which is a herb that is supposed to have many cheering and restoring properties. It's also made into a summer wine. And there's a beautiful painting, a Japanese painting that also inspired some of the images in this. Self-Portrait in Sweet Woodruff. Tumbled in fractious, scratchy grief, let me lie in the undergrowth, feel sorrow pass from me into the earth. Hold receiving soil and give my aching shoulder, this eroding spine, the bruised cage in which these organs heave. I don't know how or why they carry on, except they do and bear the weight of me with them. Two roads diverged, and I lay down, for what else could I do? Sink to my knees and stretch out long, heart tattered, in a lap of solving green. Let braver travellers venture on. Let me succumb and dream among the leaves as if I were a child again and no one there to call me in. I saw a painting once like this, of ink on silk, moist emerald, a shaded world. The trees rise silently and a skein of weasel threads the white starred forest floor. A weasel paused among fishmint, wild strawberries. This is that pause, a forest bath, soul tunneling, a time to sleep among the beetles in a cloak of rain and fragrant asteroids and wake, May-dazed, to a softer path, an apple green music, pale vanilla light, a cup of stem-steeped early summer wine. Thank you.
I thought the dawn said run, but it said rise. I thought the sky said storm, but it said sail. I thought the road said hard, but it said heart. I thought the rock said break, but it said breathe. I thought the raven said die, but he said thrive. I thought the fire said burn, but it said bloom. I thought the rain said cold, but it said clear. I thought the night said fear, but it said flow. I thought my mind was all the language I'd need, but I was mishearing the world. So I walked into the forest and knew when the tree said timber, it meant limb, and knew when the doe said danger, she meant dreamer, and knew when the rowan said blood, it meant blessed, and knew when the mud said filth, it meant faith. I thought the earth was a sorrow. Also, it is a psalm. So that poem is called Song. It comes towards the end of my collection. I thought it would pick up some of the themes that we've been talking about today, themes that Isobel and Ian have already been talking about and reading poems about so beautifully, those themes of the landscape and place and grief. And that poem, I think, explores the ways in which sometimes engaging with the landscape can echo our own griefs, but at the same time offer ways out of those griefs. As Jane has mentioned in her introduction, my book sort of circles through the seasons, and we're just on we're into autumn now, aren't we? Summer is behind us. So I thought what I would do is read some poems that move from autumn into winter and then give you a hopeful ending by coming out into spring. And this next poem is called A Spider's Web on Exmoor. An opening of heather frames a rhizome stitched from dew, fine as cattle breath in frost. Pearls of blossom blush amber to pink. Water rushes through this land, and now we've stopped. We feel it give like horsehair stuffed in an antique bed, all oaken scent of whiskey corks. The wind is plucking at our clothes and at the wool in wire fences. This web distorts, still waits for tiny deaths to prick its nerves. In certain weather, we see the space between all things. I'm remembering one of Isobel's poems earlier. She talked about trees which have imprinted me, or trees which have made that kind of imprint upon you, which I think is a lovely idea. I'm going to read one of the tree poems in my own book now, about a tree which is just outside my window, in fact. So a very lovely old tree was cut down for safety reasons by our local council, and my partner, who has a great interest in trees, has just kind of bothered them until they replaced it with a new tree. And this poem is also about thinking about the way that climate change is affecting the way that our seasons appear to us, the way that temperature changes are not happening at times that we're kind of expecting them to happen, and how that's changing the way we see the seasons, the way we experience them. And it's called November. I love you for plaguing the council contractor who ripped out an awkward tree yards from our door, until they planted this hornbeam that grows narrow as a boy new in our sight. They chose it, I imagine, for its modest claim on earth and sky. But oh, autumn makes it ecstatic, brandishing leaves of old gold like flames in the icon of a martyrdom. This year's season's too warm. The tree turns late. The world now seems to tilt and shake beneath us. We have few days before the cold will cast this beauty at our worthless feet. So little time to spend our awe on treasure. The next poem I'm going to read is the title poem of the book. Lots of the poems in the book are paired, or I talk about the same subject twice, or I return to the same subject at different times of year. This is one of those. It's about a field which is not very far from the village where my parents have lived for the last 30 years or so. And it's not a particularly interesting field or exciting field, but it's one I pass a lot and have looked at a lot. And this is about what the field is like in winter. Where once was field, the flood has broken bounds. Ditch and road are one grey film. Wind ruts in divots sheep have made, and hedges shred black plastic, expose the nests of season's end. The earth is deep, unwalkable, a mire to suck you down and tan you in the land's brown juice. 1,000 years of empty sleep will leave you wizened, pungent, the head gone springy as a nut. By then, the field's forgotten all your kind. A final blessing. So we're moving from November into February now, so it's into the depths of winter, which are still ahead of us for this year, thankfully. And this is a poem that I wrote quite a few years ago, just driving through the snow, a series of mornings where I had to drive through the snow to get to work, just looking out onto that landscape and sort of feeling the pull of that frozen landscape on the mind, I suppose. And it's just called February. I stepped across the threshold into a world of cold, as carefully as if I entered a sleeping infant's room. Instead of dawn, I saw the sky shift from Marian to Egyptian blue. In fields and woods, the snow had gathered acres of light. I dreamed I walked into that daze and laid my body down. I had an empty mind of ice, a silent tongue of ice. And in that fever, I let myself be sung, then, like a song, dissolve. We've talked about all of our books connecting with different kinds of grief in their engagement with the landscape. This was a book that obviously written during the time of COVID, which took the life of my father. And this was a poem that was written 12 months, more or less 12 months after he had died. Anniversary. I take my breaths of these 12 months and fill a sky where nobody lives, its half moon catching invisible sun. Black poplars are smeared with mistletoe, shadows on an X-rayed lung. Down here, the mulch of earth and grass is sharp and true as rising dough. Twilights are blue that's sweet to inhale, a copper penny tang on the gums. Even my sad body is praise. Today, I remember how you refused the struggle for air, when all they offered was bottled and dripped to sterile machines. I draw a world into me now. Taste the promise of the turning year. Moving out of winter back into spring, a much more hopeful time. But this poem is a poem reflecting on really the beginning of the war in Ukraine. It was written in March 2022. And apart from the very terrible violence obviously perpetrated against the people of Ukraine, it was a time when Russian propaganda, the statements of various Russian politicians and pundits seemed to be all about this great threat of, well, if you don't do what we want, we're going to use our nuclear weapons and we're going to destroy the world. And that kind of mad, destructive and sort of inhuman language was something that was very much in my mind as I was thinking about this poem, which is called In Wartime, but is also about crocuses. In wartime, who dares to speak today of crocuses? Their purple banners ripple in morning cold. Closed, they augur coming heat. Our flowers ease apart to show yolk yellow stigma in their deepest fold. Inside the houses, news breaks bones, as every day it must. Loving this world, we know, is no way out. But still, we guard the gift of our attention, lest it be racked upon the mind of power. We seek a gentle reflex towards the day. Excuse me. Okay, so I shall finish now on the second of the field poems I mentioned, the field in winter earlier. This is the field in spring, so it's the same field but viewed from a different season. The field in spring. Say this piece of lands and I, a sleeping king has closed upon his realm. Say it flickers now in March as vision moves beneath the membrane. A synapse twitching at the touch of light. Say it opens wide and is a mirror, trapping silver in its troubled pool. Clouds are racing through it, a dance the earth itself becomes. The shoulders roll, the belly heaves, a ponderous gavotte. The weary monarch stumbles to reign, reclaims his ruined crown. Thanks for listening.
I think we're all going to now join you together on the screen. So Isobel, David, Ian, hopefully we should be able to see all of you. Fantastic. Just to say, what incredible readings. Thank you so much to all three of you. That was intensely moving, really beautiful readings that reminded us of humanity and the power of language to to speak at times when things are challenging in our world around us, and also to remind us of the beauty of the natural world and of our innate part in all of that and our connection to it. What extraordinary readings. Thank you so much. And I'd just like to quickly also say thank you to Berwick Literary Festival for hosting us all, to Peter, Cian and Michael for again inviting Nine Arches Press and our poets to be here, and to now turn to Isobel, Ian and David, and to give a moment's applause before we all vanish from your screens. Thank you to our lovely audience as well for joining us for this really powerful reading on a Friday morning. It's been a pleasure to be in your company. Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.